Welcome to my presentation on Dante's Purgatory. This will be a filmed keynote slide presentation, so feel free to pause as needed to review the material on the slides as I narrate through. So this was a long and difficult piece of amazing poetic literature, and there were many ideas on which to focus. A motif I found throughout the work that is also common among ancient texts was an underworld wherein the souls could find salvation or expedite their suffering by the prayers and the alms of the living. What I explored was how purgatory came about. What was the foundation on which Dante built his work? I'll provide a very brief overview of the ancient, biblical, and medieval texts up to the 13th century when purgatory became, in doctrine, an actual place and time for souls to be purged while awaiting paradise. The relative objective is to tie this all into Dante's ascent as he encounters souls requesting his help. A little bit about Dante. He was born in Florence, Italy in 1265. His mom died when he was just a child, and he had 3 children with Gemma Donati before being exiled from Florence. The work we read is the middle portion of Dante's Divine Comedy, the first being the Inferno, and the last being Paradise. The suffering of departed souls can be found in the oldest literary text, Gilgamesh. Offerings and sacrifices of water and food were made for the shades in the underworld by the living family members. Gilgamesh, who failed to attain immortality, was set by the gods to be the lord of the underworld upon his death. He would be the apparent Cato of the Sumerian and Babylonian scripts. Skipping ahead to the Old Testament, the literature relies heavily on 2 Maccabees 12:38 through 45 as the first biblical evidence of an eschatology other than the traditional heaven and hell. This scripture, along with others, including within the Apocrypha, allude to places, worlds, and hopes for salvation of the departed souls. We also learn in Judaism of alternatives such as Sheol or Abraham's bosom. Here are a few examples from the New Testament alluding to, perhaps, an in-between place. The book, The Birth of Purgatory by Jacques Le Goff in 1984, seems to be the authority text on this topic among scholars, not that there isn't exegetical discourse in the literature. His research illustrates that the 3rd century Christian theosophers, if you will, Clement and Origen, were the first to explicate the purgatorial construct. This was followed by Augustine in the 4th century, who Le Goff regards as the authority on early purgatorial concepts. Arriving now in late antiquity, we come to St. Patrick, who, after having been abducted as a child and brought to Ireland as a slave, returned there as an adult man of the cloth to convert pagans to Christianity. Purgatory is anachronistically attributed to St. Patrick, as you will see. There's no shortage of myth or tale as to where the earthly purgatory existed or gateway thereto. However, much of the literature generally points to Lough Derg, Ireland. Sometime in mid-12th century, Gilbert, a Cistercian monk, traveled to Ireland to find a suitable place for a monastery. He was accompanied by Knight Owein, a translator and bodyguard. During their travels, Owein pilgrimaged to Lough Derg and elected to experience purgatory while still alive. He was prepped and briefed by bishops and then allowed to enter the purgatorial realm. He was immediately tempted and intimidated by demons and was shown the fiery punishments of the souls. Owein successfully advanced to what appeared to be paradise and returned to tell Gilbert about his experience. Gilbert, some 30 years later, retold Owen's story to another Cistercian monk, H. of Saltrey, who memorialized it in Latin. So what does this all have to do with Dante's Purgatory? That the Florentine was not influenced by Owen's vision is beyond question, and while it would be misleading to draw the literary parallels between Lough Derg and the Divine Comedy too rigidly, the poem quite obviously derives its major structure from the legends then widespread. Before moving on, let's take a look at when and how purgatory as a noun, that is, a time and place, came into acceptance. In the late 12th century, there were increased interests and desires for answers as to where souls go and what happens there. This is reflected in the period's works insofar as the time, place, and state between death and judgment. Scholars, theologians, and church leaders in the late 12th century responded. Le Goff's examination of historical works show that purgatory, in its context as an actual place and state of expiation, did not exist prior to the year 1170. A snapshot of history puts Peter Comester and Peter Lombard of Notre Dame, as well as Pope Innocent III, at the center of purgatory's acceptance by the Church as a time, place, and state after death. According to Le Goff, purgatory was born at Notre Dame, Paris, by Peter Comester between 1170 and 1180. The passage from time to eternity, the overcoming of sin, God's salvific plan, these are the great themes of Dante's second canticle. Dante seems to have taken poetic license to expand upon Pope Innocent III's determination of the third place of possibility for a soul to go after death. Indeed, while the absolute good may have eluded judgment and gone directly to heaven, and the absolute wicked directly to hell, those somewhere in between went to purgatory. However, as Hollander points out, there are essentially three levels of Dante's purgatory: a pre-ante-purgatory, an ante-purgatory, and the mountain itself. Hollander further states, quote, Dante is essentially responding to Christian formulations of the soul's pre-eternal afterlife. What is perhaps most surprising is that this lone poet's imagination of what this place must look like and how it functions simply became the standard source of information about purgation. In addition to the lake, the shore, the trails, the pre-ante and ante-purgatory, and the gate, Dante negotiates the 7 terraces of deadly sins in his ascent to paradise. The parallel of Thomas Merton's 7-story mountain came to mind during this reading. Just as Merton was exploring his soul deeper and deeper, so was Dante seeking clarity and cleansing. Dante continuously encountered souls both known and unknown to him, where it is alluded or directly stated that prayers would expedite their suffering. Dante, with the help of Virgil, angels, and even other souls who were encountered, successfully ascended the 7 terraces and reached paradise at the top of the mountain where he expected to meet Beatrice. According to Barolini and Lansing, Beatrice's dominant presence in Dante's work, but little is known about her outside the literature life. They further suggest she is a Christ-like metaphor, a female in whom God is reflected. Looking back on some of our other readings, we can tie in this quote from Boethius, which alludes to an anticipated type of purgatory upon his death. Moreover, much like Knight Owein in the Anchoresses, I find that Dante underwent his purge while still living. This blessing gives him the opportunity to purge his sins and get a glimpse of what is to come. Furthermore, he becomes an aid to others, both living and dead. He vows to pass along the prayer requests as well as to share his experience with others who remain alive.